What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.
Good afternoon. We are doing it live now, weekday afternoons at 4 o'clock. We get right down to business here with a news-driven hour. We're doing more in 2024 now at 4 in the afternoon. You're listening to Mottek On Money, live on the air here, 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KABC.com, and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Another record-shattering day for stocks. We've ended higher. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? 2 out of the 3 benchmark averages hitting record highs today. The Dow and the S&P 500. The Dow gaining just about 50 points, settling at 38,726. That is a record high close. And the S&P 500 moved up just about 3 points. Good enough for a record high at 4,997. Let's call it 4,998. In fact, did pop above 5,000 for the first time just before the closing bell, settled just below 5K for the S&P 500. Stocks moving higher today into a record high territory on the latest news on earnings. Also, new readings on the economy. On the earnings front, it was a mixed bag today. We saw oil giant ConocoPhillips shares rising after it beat analyst expectations for profit and sales. We did get a report showing unemployment lines. Let's see, did get a bit shorter this past week by 9,000 to 218,000. Mortgage rates held steady. Wholesale inventories in the U.S. rose by just about 0.5% in December. We see shares of Under Armour moving slightly higher after that apparel company reported third-quarter profits that beat analyst expectations. New York Community Bank Corp., which has been in the spotlight lately, pulling back another 6.5% today after an analyst downgraded the stock on concerns that depositors might start to flee, given the concerns there in the commercial real estate world and other factors. Spirit Airlines shares moving higher today by about 3%. That company posted a slimmer than expected loss in the latest quarter. And Wynn Resorts, the Vegas casino giant, moving up more than 6%, hitting the jackpot today after the company posted fourth-quarter adjusted earnings that beat analyst expectations. The price of oil moving higher again today. Looks like it's hit a new high for the year, above $76 a barrel in New York. More heartbreak amid rising tensions in the Middle East, with Secretary of State Blinken leaving the Middle East after the U.S. and Israel spiked the latest hostage deal proposed by Hamas yesterday. According to Fox News, Blinken spent the better part of the past week negotiating with Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and Hamas over a potential hostage release deal. No deal. The proposal sent over by Hamas contained items that Israel and the U.S. deemed unrealistic, and Blinken is now departing with little progress being made on that issue. All this a day after a senior commander of an Iran-backed militia was killed by U.S. drone strike in Baghdad. In Washington, high drama there, with the U.S. Supreme Court hearing arguments on whether President Trump can be disqualified from running for president. Justices sounding broadly skeptical of efforts to kick the former president off the 2024 presidential election ballot. We'll get expert opinion here on that coming up in just a moment. The justices spent a lot of time during the 90-minute hearing on whether the January 6th incident was indeed an insurrection. Meanwhile, a big lawsuit filed today involving a soap opera star suing a production company and 2 company executives over alleged sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and wrongful termination. The lawsuit involves actress Ariana Zucker, who played Nicole Walker on the long-running NBC soap opera Days of Our Lives. I'll discuss that case tonight with prominent Los Angeles attorney ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR, attorney and legal commentator on the major networks and right here on 790 KABC. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, what happened today in Washington, and the whole works. Joining us live now, the one and only Ben Stein for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation, live right here on 790 KABC. Ben Stein, financial and political commentator, author of numerous books, an actor, too, who played basically himself as the economics professor in the movie you all know, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and one of the most famous scenes in American cinema. Ben Stein, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
My great pleasure, sir. Always a pleasure.
If you can put your attorney hat on, you're also an attorney here, and I know you were covering and listening to the Supreme Court proceedings today. Give us your reaction, first of all, to what happened there.
I thought that the justices handled themselves quite well. I was happy to hear that they saw to the essence of the problem. One, this thing that happened January 6th was by no stretch of the imagination an insurrection. It would be no more of an insurrection than a Sunday prayer service would have been. That's calling it an insurrection was just a total joke. It was an insult to the intelligence of the readers and the listeners and to the justices. The insurrection language in the 14th Amendment was intended to apply to the Civil War, which was a war in which 800,000, roughly 800,000 men got killed. It might have been 700,000. A great many men got killed in a series of extremely violent battles. Nothing like what happened on January 6th, in which one person got killed. It was a Capitol policeman. The exact circumstances are somewhat unclear, but it was nothing like an insurrection. It was an insult to the intelligence, as they say, the intelligence of Americans to call it an insurrection. Second, Trump had nothing to do with it. In any event, Trump gave a speech, and I seem to be the only person in the world who actually spent a few hours reading and then rereading the speech. And Trump not only said, "I don't want you to use any violence," he said, "If you're going up there with a view towards even threatening violence in my name, don't go. I don't want anything like violence in my name." And he said, "We think we have spotted some very serious statistical errors in the calculation of the votes. We'd like you to emphasize that when you're talking about it. Nothing about firearms, nothing about knives, nothing about guns. This is not an insurrection." And the idea that the justices in Colorado brought it up as such is it's frightening that the justices in a great state like Colorado would get it so wrong.
Just about every write-up I've seen indicated the justices appear to be skeptical of this argument today. When are we expecting a ruling, and what do you expect to be the outcome of this?
I think the ruling will come pretty soon because, after all, we're already in getting close, fairly close, in mid-February, and the election is this year. We've got to get some action to get Mr. Trump on the ballot or not on the ballot in a clear way, and he has to be on the ballot. I mean, if he's not on the ballot, he might as well just grind up the Constitution of the U.S. and flush it down the toilet. This was in no sense an insurrection. It had nothing to do with the 14th Amendment at all. And let's just say some very poorly educated justices in a beautiful, beautiful state of Colorado, where my wife and I used to live, got very badly off track, and let's hope they can get back on the track.
On the air live with the one and only Ben Stein for our Frank and Stein conversation here, and certainly a lot riding on this for the economy as well. It should be noted, I remember the market turned around late last year when that poll found President Trump would beat President Biden in a head-to-head matchup. I believe the New York Times had that poll late last year. And of course, we saw the market rally to record highs, obviously not only possibly for that reason, but also because of what's happening with AI and the Mag 7 and everything else that's been going on and expectations for the Fed to cut rates and so forth. But what about the economy and all this, Ben Stein, and all a lot riding on this Supreme Court decision and everything else that's going on?
Well, a lot is riding on, as you said, everything else that's going on. It's a kind of terrifying situation that we've moved way, way, way far away from what the framers of the Constitution had in mind when they created the Constitution and when, after the Civil War, they created the various amendments intended to shut down the possibility of any more civil wars. The economy is really very, very strong. It's incredibly strong. It's amazing that, considering that we went through a genuine pandemic, a real serious pandemic such as we haven't seen in the U.S. At least since the post-World War I, not post-World War II period. And we've come out on the other side of it, true, with very bad inflation. But basically, we've come out of it quite well. I think Mr. Powell, at some point, is going to wake up and find that the American people are singing hosannas of praise to him. I can't think of a better Fed chairman there's been certainly in my lifetime, and I just hope and pray that we get somebody like him in the future. He's just an amazing gentleman, and we really are lucky to have him. He's handled everything that he could have handled right, as far as I can tell. We're a very lucky nation to have people like him in positions such as his.
On there live with Ben Stein, and he's not even an economist, right? Isn't he an attorney?
I believe that's correct, although it's hard to say what economics even is nowadays, Frank. I mean, we are in somewhat uncharted territory. God bless Mr. Powell. He's obviously a very, very smart guy. He sees what's going on, and he doesn't ride hobby horses off in many different directions simultaneously. He tries his very best to do the right thing, and based upon what he has learned, and I think he's done very well. I'm happy we've got him there, and I think it would be a very good idea if Mr. Trump wins, if we kept Mr. Powell there for a good long while.
Although former President Trump recently said that he would not reappoint Powell if he were to be reelected.
I don't think Mr. Trump is right on that score, and I don't know what to make of it. I mean, I like Mr. Trump very, very much, but I think he's made a mistake there. I don't think we're going to get anybody as good as Mr. Powell is. And let's maybe back up a step if Mr. Trump wins and think about trying to keep Mr. Powell right there where he is, where he can keep doing his fine work. I mean, this was a real stroke of good fortune for the USA, getting Mr. Powell in this job. He really knows his stuff.
Well, you're a smart guy. You do not ride hobby horses either, so we will continue to follow that very, very closely. And if you could put your geopolitical analyst hat on for a moment with the very serious issues happening in the Middle East and price of oil moving higher again today with what's going on with the retaliatory strikes by the U.S. on targets there in the Middle East. And, of course, Israel still fighting the terror group Hamas. Give us your assessment of what's playing out there in the Middle East.
The story of the Middle East is a disgrace to mankind. And the idea that the terrorists from Hamas came into Israel, murdered 1,400 roughly civilians, people who were in no sense at fault for anything at all, period. And those people, those poor innocent people who were murdered, raped, buried alive, just tortured beyond endurance, beyond imagination, that those people are now being considered as the victims and the people that they put in harm's way by inciting the Israelis to make self-defense acts and preparations. That's astonishing. That is astonishing. And it goes back to something that I often wonder about, and I'm sure you do too. Why do people hate Jews so much? And what on earth is in the heads of people who would even think of blaming Israel for the horrible, horrible consequences of the act done by Hamas? Hamas are eras to stop our KGB, our eras are the worst kind of human atrocities, and somehow the United Nations is trying to make them into the good guys. Barry Goldwater, I guess you're probably too young to remember him, but I remember him, said a long, long time ago, 1964, let's get the UN out of the U.S. and the U.S. out of the UN. And he was right. The UN has been a great, great, great disappointment to the world community. And by the way, I think the world community, the whole idea of a world community is just nonsense. And it's really unfortunate that we have let ourselves be led down the garden path thinking that a group of nations is going to have superhuman modesty, superhuman self-restraint. These people are not saints. They're not geniuses. They're just a bunch of politicians from various countries all around the world who don't really have any particular love for the underdog or for the innocent party. These are bad people, and the sooner we get out of our head the idea we can expect much good from the United Nations, the better off we'll be. Yes, there are certain humanitarian acts that they do, that the UN does, that are just glorious, but in general, I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them.
If you just joined us, you're listening to Frank and Stein here on Mottek on Money on 790 KBC on there live with Ben Stein. Turning now to Russia and Ukraine. Of course, this Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin getting a lot of attention. Looks like the interview has now been released. Tucker Carlson's been drawing flack for going there and interviewing him. Of course, other journalists have done so in the past. What's your reaction to this controversy here, and what about the Ukraine-Russia ongoing war here?
A fascinating story, Frank. Nobody thought that the Ukraine would have been able to stand up to the Russians for this long and fight them off, fight off their incredible, vicious cruelty, fight off the fact that the Russians are very, very much more well-armed than the Ukrainians. But it's happened. It's been a modern miracle story. I think it is the modern miracle story of the post-war era in Europe. And Mr. Zelensky, I'm never sure how to pronounce his name, Zelensky. If that's it, I hope that's the right pronunciation.
Yeah.
I think he deserves a lot of credit for rallying his people to stand up to mass murder, mass rape, mass torture, and killings of innocent people. There's no adequate words of praise for the Ukrainians. Now, bear in mind, as a Jew, I am well aware that the Ukrainians were viciously anti-Semitic and helped the Nazis kill Jews during World War II. I'm well aware of that. It's a terrible thing. The Ukrainians should be ashamed of themselves for what they did, but they're not. I suspect they're not going to be. But maybe if there can be some kind of salvage left over for them, I'm hoping and praying that that's exactly what we're going to see. But who knows? What we do know is that the Ukrainians are heroes of our era. They are genuine heroes of our era.
On there live with Ben Stein, and you made it through the storms. Okay, Ben. Everybody's talking, of course, about the finally the let up and the rain and the severe weather we've had the last couple of days. We had a lot of mudslides even within the Beverly Hills surrounding area here, right? Hopefully everything you made it through okay.
Well, so far so good. I mean, I'm very, very, very grateful. We're very, very lucky. We have, as you know, a lot of houses. I'm a little liquidating them. I'm just no longer young enough to take care of so many houses at my age. But yes, I made it through okay, and my wife made it through okay. Our nurses made it through okay. Everybody made it through okay. We are very grateful to the Lord God for letting us get through this. What I think was a genuinely biblical catastrophe on such a large scale. It was one might say, a biblical catastrophe.
Well, Ben, we always thrilled to have you with us here. Thank you very much for taking the call here. We wish you a good evening, and hopefully talk to you again very, very soon. And hopefully we'll have some more time.
The sooner the better. The sooner the better, Frank. God bless you.
Yes.
God bless
Likewise.
you, my friend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Likewise.
Bye-bye, sir.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
Ben Stein. That is the one and only Ben Stein. Frank and Stein live here on 790 KBC. Ben Stein for our occasional Frank and Stein conversation here. Live on 790 KBC. And right out to the freeways we go right now. 790 KBC welcomes Train and REO Speedwagon, the Summer Road Trip 2024 to the Kia Forum, September 8th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show if you're caller 9. Call right now, 1-888-790-5222. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. A record-shattering day for the stock market, with the Dow coming in for a closing gain of 49 points. Good enough for a record-high close, 38,726. The S&P 500 up 3 at 4,998 after popping above 5,000 for the first time. Both the Dow and the S&P 500 stand at all-time highs. The Nasdaq up 37 at 15,794. The yield in the 10-year note is back up to 4.17%. Looks like Nvidia shares pulling back from its all-time high, down nearly $5 today at $6.96 and change. Bouncing back slightly here in after-hours trading. Among the winners today, shares of Ralph Lauren moving up nearly $25 at $171 and change on better-than-expected earnings results, thanks to a better-than-expected holiday season for the apparel company. The price of oil moving higher with all the upheaval in the Middle East. Crude oil futures moving up 22 cents right now after hours at $76.44 a barrel. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We are doing more in 2024 now at 4 in the afternoon. It's Mottek On Money live here in 790 KABC, streaming live online worldwide at KABC.com, and your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at KABC.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Big lawsuit getting lots of attention here in Los Angeles involving a soap opera star suing a production company and 2 company executives over alleged sexual harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and wrongful termination. The lawsuit involves actress Ari Zucker, best known for her role as Nicole Walker on the long-running NBC soap opera Days of Our Lives. Let's bring in prominent Los Angeles attorney ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR, attorney and legal commentator on the major networks and a familiar voice and name here on 790 KABC. ANAHITA, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Thank you for having me again, Frank. It's been quite some time, but it's always a privilege and honor to be on your show.
Likewise, thank you very much for taking our call here, and you're getting a lot of attention here on this big lawsuit filed here in Los Angeles by you. And tell us about take it from the top and tell us about the case that's been filed here today.
Yeah, so we filed a lawsuit on behalf of veteran Days of Our Lives actress Ariane Zucker yesterday in the Los Angeles Superior Court, as you mentioned, against the owners of the show, Corday Productions, Ken Corday, and the ousted executive producer, Albert Alar. And we've alleged various causes of action, but the essential part of our claim is that Ms. Zucker and various other women on set at Days of Our Lives were subjected to abuse and sexual harassment at the hands of Albert Alar. And I think what makes this case, Frank, that much more egregious is the fact that, as we've alleged in the lawsuit, the owners of Days of Our Lives were well aware that Mr. Alar had been engaging in this type of misconduct, this type of sexual harassment, because various other prominent actresses had lodged complaints against Mr. Alar going back for years. One of the women who's actually very publicly spoken out about her complaints about Mr. Alar is Lisa Rinna, an actress you and I both know. She's come out publicly and she stated that she lodged complaints about Mr. Alar's behavior to the production company and that essentially her complaints fell on deaf ears. And so we've alleged in the lawsuit that the company condoned and permitted Mr. Alar to continue his misconduct for years.
On the air live with attorney ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR here in Century City, and it sounds like the biggest lawsuit since really coming out of the pandemic. Of course, the Me Too movement started, it's hard to believe, in 2017 in response to the reports about what was happening with Harvey Weinstein and so forth. Tell us about how all this has played out. Obviously, sexual harassment and sexual abuse in the workplace is still happening. Are you seeing a pickup as far as legal activity once again?
Well, Frank, I was a very strong supporter of the Me Too movement. If you can believe, that was in 2018. And, it was a time for a reckoning where I think we all as a society kind of stood up and said that we will no longer tolerate this knee-jerk reaction of victim-blaming women when they complained of sexual harassment. We stood up and we said we're no longer going to call these women liars. We're no longer going to tolerate retaliation and punishing women who speak out about the abuse that they've endured, that we will no longer blackball women in certain industries, specifically in the industry of Hollywood here in Los Angeles. And so, I would say I think we've made many strides, and certainly the movement transformed the way we view sexual harassment and gender discrimination cases. But as you can see here in the case that my office just filed on behalf of Ms. Zucker, we still have a long way to go. These incidents of abuse of power in all walks of life, by the way, Frank, not just in the Hollywood arena, but in all walks of life. I mean, it's continuing. And it's still, we have a long path. We have to continue to file these lawsuits and hold these companies that condone this type of behavior and the individuals who engage in this type of behavior accountable. And that is what I've done for years, and I'll continue to do so in this case.
On the Air Live with attorney ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR. And how is it supposed to work when situations like this come up? The employee encouraged to go to HR, right? What is your guidance when people are dealing with these situations?
Absolutely, Frank. My guidance would be to immediately go to the Human Resource Department if your employer has one. Go and lodge your complaints. Put your complaints in writing. You can send an email to the powers that be. If you don't have an HR department, you can go to your supervisor, your boss. If you don't feel comfortable going to your supervisor or boss, you can always contact a civil rights attorney who will assist you in making sure that your complaints are heard and remedied. There's the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which is a governmental entity that also assists with victims that have complaints against their employers for not just sexual harassment, but all kinds of discrimination claims. So my guidance would be to definitely make sure that you let your complaints be known, and that if nothing is being done to remedy the situation, to seek legal guidance.
All right. What if there is no HR department? If I recall, I read that was the case in what we were just talking about here, right?
Yes, and so as I indicated, if your company doesn't have an HR department, then you can go to your supervisor, your boss, the owner of the company, and if you are still not comfortable doing that, if those are the individuals that might be perpetrating the harassment upon you, then you have every right to contact an attorney that will assist you and make sure that your complaints are heard and that your complaints are remedied.
All right, and as you mentioned, obviously this case getting a lot of attention here in the Hollywood press, Soap Opera Digest, all the entertainment outlets are reporting about this. But as you say, this incidents like this, as we've seen in the past, occur not just in the entertainment industry, but in all industries. Are you able to tell us? Are you getting more cases these days now that the courts are pretty much back to normal coming out of the pandemic and all that?
Yes, I hate to say it, but the answer to that question is yes. I'm sure, like many other civil rights attorneys and attorneys that handle these employment cases, I'm getting a multitude of cases and individuals that are calling me complaining of abuse that they're enduring at work. And I think, the COVID pandemic certainly put a halt on the legal process. Many cases were stayed for quite some time and put on hold, but now, as the court systems have sort of gone back to normal, we're seeing that these cases are picking up again, and we're, resuming jury trials. I've had 2 jury trials again since the COVID pandemic. Arbitrations are being conducted again, and like I said, unfortunately, we are not seeing a drop in these types of cases despite the Me Too movement, despite many women feeling like they have a voice. We still have a long way to go.
ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR, prominent attorney and legal commentator on the major networks and right here on 790 KABC with the law firm ANAHITA SEDAGHATFAR in Century City. ANAHITA, thank you very much for joining us live with that important information and about the case here today on 790 KABC.
Thank you so much, Frank. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much. And right out to the freeways now here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here on 790 KABC. Good afternoon. We are doing it live here in the 4 o'clock hour. Well, crime continues to be a big issue as the L.A. County DA's race heats up. City of Los Angeles has a new interim police chief, and now the LA City Council dealing with the impact of copper theft and other things involving city property. Let's bring in the Honorable Dennis ZINE now, former LA City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, and still a reserve officer with about, last time I counted, close to 56 years of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE, thank you very much for taking the call here this afternoon.
Frank, thank you. And your calculator is correct. 56 going on to 57, and who knows when it's going to end, but it's continuing. So I enjoy serving the public. Dominic Choi, you mentioned Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief. He started as a police officer, rose to the ranks, doing extremely well respected in the organization. He's going to be a good interim chief leading the organization. He has a number of years with the department, 28 years of service. And what's unique about Dominic Choi is that he's worked the entire area of Los Angeles. He's worked all bureaus, Valley, West, Central, and South. So he's got a true reflection and all these assignments, the detective assignments, the uniform assignments, undercover assignments, you name it, and he's worked it. So he's a great selection for this position. He doesn't want the permanent, only wants this temporary, and I think he'll do very well in that interim time.
Well, we wish him Godspeed in that important position at the moment. And come to think of it, want to salute all of the first responders, the police officers, and the firefighters out there who've been dealing with this unbelievable storm we've seen over the past couple of days. I hope you've heard thank you, and they should hear thank you again as much as possible, especially given what's happened recently.
Clearly, I can still remember back in 1969, I joined the department in 68, and in 69 we had some floods, Mandeville Canyon, a number of hillsides slid during that time. I still remember it 50 years later, and we have the reoccurrence now. We see these slides taking place all along, and Mulholland Drive is closed because of slippage, and a lot of homes were impacted by this recent rains. And it happens. It seems like the 50-year spread, and this takes place. I saw the LA River was at maximum capacity, so this torrential rain really had an impact on this area. But getting back to the LAPD, we'll find that in the time that Dominic Choi is the interim chief, the police commission, the mayor, they'll be looking at different candidates. There'll be a lot of applications for this particular position. The individual who gets this position will then lead us through the Olympics, a lot of critical time here. And the biggest challenge is not only addressing crime, but the challenge of recruiting of police officers. I was doing some research. In 2018, there were 10,057 officers. In 2018, 10,057 officers. And the number today, we are 1,099 less. What we are at right now is sadly 8,958. So what we find is the numbers keep reducing. So when you have that number dropping and you have continuing problems, crime, et cetera, and then you got some major events coming to Los Angeles, there's a desperate need to recruit police officers, and none of these incentives seem to be working. So that's a serious situation. As far as arrests, we know arrests are down, and the consequence, you don't have officers on the street. They can't make the arrest. The detectives don't have the cases to file, yet you have people who are victims of crime. So it's a real serious situation. I don't think the average citizen realizes how serious it is, but I would encourage people, when you're a victim of a crime, make sure you report it. Those reports are critical as far as showing where we are in the crime trends within this region of Los Angeles, Southern California area.
On the air live with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, and the DA's race heating up. There's one debate tonight, and there's another one next week, which I'll be involved with as moderator, as a matter of fact. So give us your assessment here of the DA's race and trying to get the pendulum to swing the other way after years of what we've been seeing out there.
Absolutely. It must swing the other way. If not, we'll continue having these crime trends, and the people run free. We saw what's happening in graffiti downtown. These aren't artists. These are graffiti. These are people committing crimes, tagging these skyscrapers in downtown Los Angeles. It's bad. It's serious. It's getting worse. But what we have with Gascon is a person who believes to let the criminals run free and prey on the people of this community, of the city of Los Angeles. So it's critical that he leaves office. We are sold out. We have over 400 people who have signed up to go to the debate, the DA's debate that we're going to be having up in Porter Ranch, the 12th district of the city of Los Angeles in the north part of the San Fernando Valley. It's going to be a spirited debate. We have all the candidates except one, and you can imagine who's declining to attend this particular debate. Everyone's showing up except the one person who needs to show up to explain why he's destroyed the county of Los Angeles with his filing policy of let the criminals run loose. But nevertheless, it's going to be a good debate. You're the moderator, and I think it's going to be an inspiring time for everyone to hear from the candidates that are going to be attending.
That's great. We'll have more information about that as we get closer on the air live with Dennis ZINE. And I see the city now trying to crack down on a lot of other crime that's happening, and this involving the theft of city property. I see the LA City Council has initiated a security assessment at city sites to combat copper theft. This is a vote that was taken directing the city, including the police department, to provide security improvement recommendations. Looks like copper theft has become a significant issue. Even catalytic converters being taken off of city vehicles, also an issue. Give us your reaction to this latest crime wave.
Well, Frank, when you notice the streetlights are out, they think the streetlight is out because the bulbs are out. No, people are stealing the copper wire from the wiring system for the streetlights. There's a number of areas in the city where this has happened, where they're stealing the copper wires. They've gone to cemeteries and steal out of cemeteries, the brass out of cemeteries. It's really, it's incredible what people are doing to steal. I don't know how much they're getting per pound, but when the streetlights are out, it's not because the bulb out, because they stole the wire. You see them invading cemeteries, and you just see this continuing trend of crime. And how you can reduce this is by having officers out there on patrol, their visible presence, deterring and apprehending individuals, and then prosecution. We can bring it back to normalcy, but it's going to take a lot of resources and a lot of patience. But the city council can pass all the motions they want. The bottom line is you have to have the people to go out there and do the enforcement. And catalytic converters, they're still stealing catalytic converters. That hasn't stopped, and those are over $1,000 to replace. So the crime trend continues. I don't want to frighten people. I want to give them the reality. It's serious. Oakland, California, the California High Patrol is going to go to Oakland to support the Oakland Police Department because they don't have enough officers to provide safety. We are at a real crisis stage in this state. We need to buckle down and do what's good for all the law-abiding citizens, and that's the problem as we see right now.
Dennis ZINE, thank you very much, and thank you, by the way. You're an angel in the City of Angels here with 56 years of service to the city, former L.A. City Council member, longtime LAPD sergeant, and still out there as a current LAPD Reserve officer. When you speak, people listen. Dennis, thank you very much for that thorough update, and look forward to speaking with you again very, very soon.
Thank you, Frank. Good evening to you.
Thank you very much. And we have a record-shattering day for the stock market. Let's recap that for a second here. The Dow up 49 points. We're at a record-high close today of 38,726. The S&P 500 up 3 at 4,998. And the NASDAQ moving up 37 points today at 15,794. And the yield in the 10-year note is back up to 4.17%. The price of oil moving higher. Looks like we've hit new highs for the year here in New York, up around 76 and change. This is Mottek On Money on 790 KBC. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang. He's coming up next right here on 790 KBC.
You loved Lala Kent on Vanderpump Rules. Now get to know her on Give Them Lala.
We're going into Vanderpump Rules. Easton, you told me that Raquel is a little nervous. She talks about it on Rachel Goes Rogue, that she's a little nervous for her podcast to be airing while season 11 is airing. Let me tell you something. She should have come back to the show. It would have been very different than what she thinks it would have been. She shot herself in the foot. She's not the brightest bulb. We all know this.
Watch what Lala is talking about on YouTube or search for Give Them Lala wherever you listen.